Let's talk about the Denver Broncos. Our preview for the 2025 Broncos, their offseason in 60 seconds. Extended Zach Allen, 4 years, $102 million, $70 million guaranteed. Extended Cortland Sutton, 4 years, $92 million, $41 guaranteed. Brought back DJ Jones, 3 years, $39 million, $26 guaranteed. Talanoa Hufanga, 3 years, $39 million, $20 guaranteed. Dre Greenlaw, 3 years, $31 million, $13.5 guaranteed. Brought in Evan Ingram, 2 years, $23 million. Extended Jared Stidham, 2 years, $12 million. Those backup quarterback contracts, man, God bless them. Small deals for Trent Sherfield, Justin Strnad, J.K. Dobbins. In the draft, took Jediah Berry in the cornerback, 20th overall. Running back R.J. Harvey, second round, 60th overall. Wide receiver Pat Bryant, third round, 74th overall. And edge rusher Savion Jones in the third round, 101st overall. Lost Cody Barton and Javonte Williams in free agency, and then traded Devon Vele to the Saints for a fourth-round pick. Dave, what are you excited about watching for the 2025 Denver Broncos?
The best defense in the NFL, added two of the biggest kickers from one of the best defenses of the last 5 years to their unit. That's where it begins and ends with me. And there's other exciting stuff about the Broncos, but this was already the best defense in the NFL, or certainly on that short list. And now Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga are there. I think it's worth pointing out, it's been a couple up and down years for Hufanga since the All-Pro season. I'm not ready to say he's one of the best safeties in the NFL at this moment. Greenlaw coming off the Super Bowl injury as well. We'll see what these guys actually look like, but the potential is there to inject a whole lot of attitude and a whole lot of playmaking ability into a defense that didn't really need it, but it's really fun that they got it.
You look at it, there are so many just banshees on this team. Nick Bonito in the way that he plays. Now you add Greenlaw and Hufanga to the mix. DJ Jones is just, I mean, when we talk about like glass eaters in the NFL, like DJ Jones is the exact player that you're talking about. John Franklin Myers has been a really nice piece for some of these defensive lines over the last few years. I love guys like that. Yeah. Give me all of your like 290-pound tweeners in this version of the NFL. It used to be a negative thing. Now I think you can really use some of these guys based on how, just the way that teams think about pass rush skill sets. And we talk about pocket pushers and guys that just have a little bit more size and strength. And then Zach Allen was one of the most productive interior rushers in the league last year. Like, they have so many difference-making players up front. And they have the defensive player of the year at one of their cornerback spots. Like, we talked about this a lot over the last couple of weeks, Derek, this idea of if we're trying to pick great defenses every year, sometimes it can be hard. The term that we kept coming back to is this team has a chance to be the best defense in the league. And I think you can make an argument that the Broncos have as good a chance as any to be that team.
Yeah, like if I was picking one today, for me, it's probably them or Houston. But yeah, man, like this front is insane. Like, it's just incredibly deep in terms of the pass rushers. All of the starting interior guys are awesome. And their biggest issue to me last year was the spine of the defense. And what did they do? They went out and got Dre Greenlaw, who I think if he can return healthy is going to be one of the better linebackers in the league again. And then Talanoa Hufanga. And so again, I know that there's a little bit of like injury concern with those guys, but they are.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, we will. But those guys, for whatever games they are out there for, are considerably better players than were out there at those spots for this team last year. So they're going from, it's not just the quality, but this is like, in terms of ass kicker index, this team was like a 6 out of 10 last year. Like, it was a great defense, but it was more like, okay, their pass rush is just really fast. Now they're like a 9 out of 10 with guys like Greenlaw and Hufanga.
Can I share a stat with y'all that I found that I really, really loved while I was looking at stuff for this?
I would love it.
Denver led the league in sacks with 63. Do you know how many they bring back from that team to this team?
That's probably most of it.
58?
Did Baron Browning have like a sack early in the season?
61 and a half of those sacks are coming back. Cody Barton had 1.5 sacks for this team, and he's the only guy that's not still there. That's when you turn over a third of the roster every year in the NFL, that's insane. And it's very exciting if you're a Broncos fan.
That's why it was fun to see them bring back DJ Jones. And obviously, re-signing Zach Allen, this group is going to be together for a little while here. I was wondering, based on some of the multi-year outlooks for the way that group was built, whether they would draft a defensive tackle or an interior player really high in this draft because Zach Allen was a pending free agent, and they're just deciding to roll with this group again. You look at both sides of the ball, the things I wanted the Chargers to do this offseason was essentially, if there's a list of priorities, 1, add a little bit of pop at tight end and running back, and 2, bring some ass-kicking energy to the spine of the defense. They did exactly those two things. And I don't want that to be the marker by how we judge teams' off seasons, whether or not they did the things I wanted them to do, but it is pleasing when it happens. And that's exactly why I think that there's been like growing affinity for this team for a lot of people, is because you look at the holes they had coming into it, they filled those holes, they were already a good team. There just aren't that many areas of the roster, and we'll get into this, where there are a lot of issues. Like there's a lot of vacillation based on how the quarterback plays, et cetera, all of that. But there are not a lot of glaring holes with the way that this team is built right now because of the way that they address this offseason.
And I think at least some small part of it too with the defense too is like, don't you always feel better about a team or a unit when they're great and then they double down on it being great? Like you
Absolutely.
just feel better betting on it the next year. You're like, there's no volatility here. They're gonna kick ass again, and that's exactly what this defense did.
Yeah, and I think you get ahead of aggression a little bit that
Mhm.
way if that's your mindset, and hopefully that is the case for this team that obviously took a massive leap on defense last year, and often that stuff comes back to earth. But is this one of those teams, because they spent so many of their available resources to reinforce this group, that maybe it comes a little bit less for the Broncos than it might for some other teams that have a huge one-year lift? Derek, you had another answer here. What are you excited to watch with the 2025 Broncos?
I want to see what Sean Payton's got up his sleeve. I mean, this was an offense that I think surprised us a little bit last year in a number of ways. I think we, given the Russell Wilson thing, didn't know exactly what we were going to get from Sean Payton anymore. And then I think a lot of us, myself included, I'll throw myself out there for sure, did not have that much faith that Bo Nix could like commandeer a pretty good offense. And that was actually not the case. They were a dead average offense, but it's just I think most people thought they were going to be worse than that. And so I'm really excited for what it's going to look like. Peyton's run game is always a little bit of a charcuterie board, and I expect that to be the case going into next year as well. Like he kind of runs a little bit of everything. Hopefully they can just get a little bit better at some of that stuff. I also want to see more, and this ties into Evan Ingram specifically. I want to see them be a little bit more vertical. And I want to see them be able to attack the seams in a way that is like not just, hey, Cortland Sutton, can you run to the hash on a dig route? And I do think Evan Ingram brings that. The only team by percentage that threw to their tight ends less than the Broncos last year was the New York Giants. That's going to like flip this year where, maybe they're not going to be second in tight end targets, but they're going to throw to Evan Ingram a lot. And like that alone and the gravity that he's going to bring to the offense, even if he's not an elite player, I do think it's just going to change the math on the passing offense entirely. So I'm just excited to see what that actually turns out looking like.
We talked to our Broncos writer, Nick Osmider, last week on our final training camp notebook show that we did. And he was mentioning that there's a good chance that the Devon Vele trade is more a product of them using Evan Ingram as like that big slot player rather than one of the receivers coming along, whether it's Pat Bryant, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, guys we'll talk about. So this team, I think, used 11 personnel and like 58% of its snaps last year, which was, I think, the 20th highest rate in the league. Is it even less this year? Like, do we see more 12 personnel even than we did last year because Evan Ingram kind of becomes a wide receiver in some of those looks? So how Ingram reshapes that offense and the way that that receiving core is deployed, I absolutely think is worth keeping an eye on. Let's talk about the swing points, Dave, for the 2025 Broncos, where this season might pivot for Denver. What do you got?
So we got a bigger conversation coming about Bo Nix, obviously, but independent of the Bo Nix thing, I just really want to know what the Broncos actually get out of RJ Harvey. And I think RJ Harvey, every year there's a group of players where the popularity of fantasy football not grossly, but like just dramatically inflates the amount of conversations that we have about a guy. And RJ Harvey is that dude. Like the 60th overall pick in the draft would not generate this much discussion if fantasy football wasn't as popular as it is. And I'm curious to see what RJ Harvey actually does. Like, is he good enough to sort of take the ball and run with it in a running back position that doesn't have a whole lot coming back from last year, doesn't have a true number one anyway? Obviously, there's a lot of reasons to think why this might be really good. Denver's run game was middle of the pack last year. 16th in rushing success rate, 26% of their runs went over expectation. They were 29th in yards after contact per rush, which is, again, down there with the Kareem Hunt Chiefs. Like, just not a whole lot of guys making stuff happen outside of what is blocked for them. Harvey's exciting. I get it. I'm encouraged to see the ways that Sean Payton could use him if he really is that good. I think it's worth mentioning all of Sean Payton's best New Orleans offenses relied heavily on their running back wearing a variety of hats, from Darren Sproles to Alvin Kamara. Even Reggie Bush did it way back in the early days. So, like, the best version of RJ Harvey could be super exciting and could do a lot of fun stuff, but is the 60th overall pick in the draft really ready to do that right out of the gate, or is this a little bit of fantasy football wish casting?
I think it's Sean Payton wish casting. I think it's a lot of, we've seen Sean Payton do this with backs who kind of look like that. And I think people are in particular like bringing up like Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara was 2 inches and 10 pounds bigger than RJ Harvey is. And like he was, I think, a more put together runner immediately than I think that we've seen from RJ Harvey. Like he had a bigger pedigree coming out of college. Like Kamara felt like somebody who slipped through the cracks for what he actually ended up being. And RJ Harvey feels a little bit more like Sean Payton just being really attached to a certain archetype and hoping that it works. And it might, right? Like Harvey is a really explosive player when he can get to the second level. This Denver offensive line blocking wise is not as good as they probably like the perception of them probably is. And that makes me
They're better
worry.
in pass protection. And I think
Yes.
part of that is the pass protection plan for this team.
Exactly. And like if they're going to be an average-ish run blocking unit again, which they were last year, that worries me a little bit for backs like J.K. Dobbins and, to me, RJ Harvey, where his biggest issue was vision. And if the running game isn't just going to open up stuff for you, makes me a little bit iffy on it.
It's funny because when I'm thinking about what makes RJ Harvey attractive stylistically based on recent NFL history, it's actually what Bucky Irving did last year. Like, I think what Bucky Irving did last year and just some of the shiftiness in space, the explosiveness, what he did for that Bucs team, that's why I'm sitting there being like, what can RJ Harvey be for the Broncos? But that gap scheme run, the gap scheme runs in Tampa and just how they could move people in the space that they create allows us to see the best version of a player like Bucky Irving. I think there's a reasonable question about whether the Broncos offensive line can be that dominant in the run game in order for us to realize the best version of a player like RJ Harvey. I will say I loved studying RJ Harvey before the draft. I really, really liked what I saw from RJ Harvey. And I think the explosiveness and just, again, how elusive he is at the second level and what sort of big plays might be available for this team that just weren't there last year, I'm excited to watch that. They were 19th in explosive run rate from running backs last year. Last year, the only running back in college football with more 15-yard runs than RJ Harvey was Ashton Genty. And so
it's a good stat.
I think that there are a couple limiters on what he could be this year, body type, all that kind of stuff, but I'm at least curious to see what this ends up looking like because I did really like what I saw from him in college. This is a really boring one for my swing point for the Broncos. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I think you would say about every team, but I think for this team specifically, it's worth mentioning. It's just health, and it's twofold for me. They missed a combined 8 starts from their offensive line last year. And this offensive line and the quality of pass protection that they provided throughout the entire year was key to this team's success. We'll talk about how that affected Bo Nix in a positive way here in a second. But let's say you lose half a season from Quinn Miners, something like that. You can say that about every team, but again, I think we're kind of nitpicking with this team because there aren't as many glaring weaknesses. So I think offensive line health, but also the 2 biggest free agent additions you put on this team this year have extensive injury histories. Like, it would be silly not to mention the downside case for these guys. Like, it's not all wheels up with Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga. There's a reason that they didn't stick in San Francisco, and there's a reason they were available for reasonable prices this offseason, and it's because they've struggled to stay on the field. So if we get worse offensive line luck and you lose one or both of your big splashy free agent additions, what does that do to the complexion of this Broncos team over the course of the season? Again, you could say that about everybody, but I think for them specifically, the health thing is kind of at front of mind for me. Let's talk about what's keeping us up at night about the 2025 Denver Broncos. This is a Bo Nix question, and not because he was bad last year, but I think when you're talking about what might be sticking in the back of your mind about what might limit the ceiling of this team that I think has real playoff, if not like Final Four type aspirations, It's does the offense have enough firepower that it needs for this team to take the step that they want to? And Derek, we could talk about the buckets that are involved in that, but I think the quarterback is undeniably at the center of it. Like what sort of step he takes, I think is a huge thing to consider for where the Broncos can go this year. I don't think that's an original thought.
It's not. And like there are definitely two ways to talk about this. There's the quarterback and then there's the skill players, which we do need to hit both because I do think the skill player part of it is interesting. With the quarterback, I think Bo Nix was really good at a handful of things. He was obviously a really good scrambler. That was definitely part of it. He was good at throwing on the move, and the offense catered to him doing a lot of that. And he was like a generally pretty accurate passer to all three levels. Like, was he always on time? Was he always making the right decisions? Did he always have the full breadth of the offense available to him? Not in my opinion, but when the ball did get out, he was generally pretty accurate, and I do think that goes a long way. But I had a couple of complaints with him that I really want to see improve for next year. First of all, 39 quarterbacks last year threw at least 200 passes. The only quarterback worse under pressure on an EPA per dropback basis was Mac Jones. That's not good. So that needs to get better. We came into the season saying that he was a guy who I think when the pocket collapses around him, he can get a little bit shaky, and I think he got a smidgen better by the end of the year, but not so much so that I don't think this is still a big issue for him. And so that needs to get better. And then also, he completed a lot of useless passes last year. He had a 43.6% overall success rate, which was like kind of below average. It was 25th out of 36 qualifiers. On completed passes, he was 35th out of 36 quarterbacks in terms of success rate. So like he just completed a lot of passes that were doing for this offense. And so that just has to change. Like he has to be able to be more aggressive and throw down the field a little bit more, or just be even more willing to use his legs because he is good at that. So I would like to see him be a guy who can create a little bit more outside of what is being given to him by the offense.
It's funny because I do think if you look at some of the numbers with him pushing the ball down the field, he did it reasonably often. But I think that's a lot of like, that's the first read within the progression. Like you're supposed to take that big dig or that shot down the field. He was willing to let those things rip. And I think that willingness to like try to hunt out those explosive plays that were like the basis of the play that was called was actually a good part of Bo Nix's game. He finished 12th in the NFL in the percentage of his throws that went at least 20 air yards. Down the field, aggressiveness was not the issue. I think it was aggressiveness within the rhythm of plays and pushing the ball into tight areas. If you look at it, this is the number that jumped out to me with this exact kind of conversation. Last year, on his quick attempts, 30.8% of his quick passing attempts, so less than 2.5 seconds last year, were screens. That was the most in the NFL by 3 percentage points. So in terms of like any sort of intermediate passes or within the rhythm of a play passes that were not like deeper shots down the field, those didn't really exist for the Broncos last year to the extent that they existed for other teams. When he was getting the ball out, it was mostly screens, like 31% of his throws. And he had one of the highest time to throws in the league on non-screens. So it was either pushing the ball down the field or getting rid of the ball very quickly. So where the stuff in the middle ends up falling this year, I think that's one of the things that I'm really going to be keeping an eye on.
You know who this actually weirdly reminds me of development curve-wise? Washington Kirk Cousins was a lot of the same way. Obviously, he wasn't the same athlete, but that whole offense when he first got in there was, I'm throwing it deep down the field to Deshaun Jackson, or we're throwing a screen or I'm checking it down. And like he did not throw the middle of the field very much. And like Bo Nix, I think kind of a little bit has the same issue. Obviously, Bo Nix circumvents that by being an athlete, but I think that was something that Kirk Cousins had to really get over. And then also managing the pocket was something that Kirk Cousins, it took 7 years for him to get any good at it. And so that's something that Bo Nix needs to fix as well.
I would like to think Evan Ingram can help with some of that at the very least.
I hope.
Yeah.
I mean, Devon Vele was that type of receiver in this offense last year. They didn't really have any others. Yeah. And so I think Evan Ingram's skill set absolutely fits the exact type of plays that I'm talking about. They really didn't have that guy other than a late drafted rookie last year. And the other part that Derek mentioned that I think is something we have to bring up with Bo Nix anytime we talk about him before the season starts. The pressure numbers are very bad. He was dead last in success rate against the blitz last year for quarterbacks with at least 350 dropbacks, and he was dead last in success rate when pressured. Without scrambles, he had a 22.2% success rate. just in the pocket.
So, like, if the ball came out or if he got
If the
sacked,
ball
I guess.
came out. The only quarterbacks with a worse success rate when you remove scrambles when pressured since 2000 were Baker Mayfield in 2022, Zach Wilson in 2021, and Justin Fields in 2022.
Man.
That's why I think it is so good, and something like we should mention the injury luck that the Broncos had. Like I'd refuse to believe it's a knock on Bo Nix to say, hey, his offensive line was good and together for the vast majority of the season. That is the ultimate ace up a rookie quarterback's sleeve. And if I had to guess, it'll probably not be so clean this year for one reason or another. I made mention of it on our pre-production call. This is an old offensive line, too. Like the average age of
older
the starters,
than you think, especially.
Older than you think, considering I feel like it's a new phenomenon that the Broncos O-line is this force. And so you look at it and you're like, oh, most of these guys are young. No, Quinn Miners is pretty young, but the tackles are north of 30. The center is 28 years old, which really blew me away. Like a year 4 player who's 28 years old. I was not ready to see that when I was doing research. Luke Wattenberg, he turns 28 in a few weeks, actually. So between the age and just the luck of football, I think Bo Nix is going to have to make do with less good protection this year. Or at least I think it's a healthy way to look at it, is just to say odds are it might not be this good in 2025. How do you handle it?
We've talked about this a lot, Derek. I think it's just creativity within the pocket, feel within the pocket, because his legs, their screen game, and his ability to push the ball downfield and some of those like bigger, heavy personnel play action shots, those were the best parts of this offense last year. And combined, it looked pretty damn good. It was a very good plan. How they fill out the rest of it, I think, becomes the real question. And I want to see how the personnel feeds into that. I mean, based on everything that we've heard, seen, read, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin are going to be more a part of this offense this year. Combined with Evan Ingram, we'll see what they get from Pat Bryant. This group, if the defense is going to be what we think, the step that the Broncos offense takes this year is going to be one of the biggest things that dictates how the NFL season goes. And that is partially on the quarterback, but I think there are a lot of other layers to it. And I think that's why there's so much intrigue and interest with every element of who this offense is going to be in 2025. Let's talk about what we're watching over the first month of the season for the Broncos. Dave, what do you got for me?
It's always fun when you're not 100% sure what the game plan is for the first round pick. And that seems to be the case for Jahdae Barron, the cornerback they drafted out of Texas. We knew going in, he's got nickel outside corner flexibility, and that's what we're hearing out of Broncos camp. I loved this, actually. Sean Payton said recently, when talking about what Barron's role could look like, he mentioned Malcolm Jenkins, who, if you go back ages ago, Malcolm Jenkins was an outside corner out of Ohio State who they played at the nickel and like kind of in a hybrid role in 2009. He didn't become the safety that we think of now until a couple years into his NFL career. So I'm curious just to see what they have in mind for him. I mean, as far as I'm aware, he hasn't even beaten out Jaquan McMillan officially for the slot job. So he might not be a day one starter. He could rotate with McMillan. He could do some safety stuff. He could be on the field in 6 defensive back looks. I don't know. But I think Vance Joseph will probably have a fun idea for what to do with him. The one thing I do know is that a top 20 pick gets on the field. Like, you got to play a guy drafted that highly one way or the other. So I'm curious to see what it looks like.
Feels like we'll see him sooner rather than later. I mean, some teams are just like this with rookies, right? Where they're going to slow play them. They're going to make them earn it. Like, I just feel like if you're going to take that guy 20th overall, you probably have a vision for him being a prominent part of your defense pretty early in the season.
Yeah, that just kind of feels like a Sean Payton type of thing that's going on.
Make them earn it.
Yeah, make them earn it.
You don't get the logo on your helmet till training camp's
exactly. Mine was basically
there are teams that like steadfastly believe that though.
Oh yeah,
and it's like
sure.
It's not about necessarily just the guys, but it's about like their teammates' perceptions of them as well. It's just like you don't want to look at that guy. I had a head coach say exactly that to me when we were talking about rookies and whether they'd break into the lineup. And I was kind of like, well, you want those guys to get those jobs, right? And he's like, well, yeah, you always kind of want that, but you can't hand it to him and have the guy next to him look at it, be like, look at this. Like, you can't do that. And so I think that trying to make sure you're considering the dynamics and everything that goes into that you're dangling the carrot for the individual player, but also taking into account the perception for the guys around him. I do think that's at front of mind for a lot of these guys as they think about how to divvy up training camp deployment, that kind of stuff.
I mean, Sean Payton's a Bill Parcells guy. That's kind of all you need to know on that stuff.
That says it perfectly.
For me, I think I was also interested in the secondary, and on my end, it's just the non-Patrick Surtain parts of the secondary. What do they look like? Riley Moss is back healthy. Is he going to be able to keep that outside cornerback job, or do they get to a place where they think Barron on the outside and McMillan inside is their best collection of 3 corners? Do we see them try a little bit more 3 safety stuff now that they have 3 safeties? PJ Locke is now a depth piece after starting for them. Is that a situation where they think they can play one of those guys in the nickel if they want to be in a big nickel look? Do we see more dime from this team because they have so much defensive back depth? How does that play into the amount of man coverage they want to play on third down? Like, just overall, the secondary and the pieces. How does Vance Joseph view those guys, and what is his vision for how he wants to cohesively deploy those guys? That is something I will be watching in the first month of the year.
Yeah, I mean, my answer to this question was basically a rewording of that, which is just like, can they play coverage the way that they want to? Because last year, for as good as the defense was, there were times where the not Patrick Surtain guys were struggling a little bit, and I think it got mostly papered over because the pass rush was so good that sometimes it just wasn't a problem or you didn't think about it. But this was a team when they got pressure last year, which was a lot because they were one of the best pass rushes in the NFL, they were 4th in success rate as a passing defense. When they didn't get pressure, they were 14th, which is still nice because you have Patrick Surtain, but that's not quite up in that elite tier that I think that they were cracking into. So if that can change by virtue of Barron being a little bit better, by Hufanga giving you a little bit of something, having a little bit more flexibility, like you said, potentially playing 3 safeties, that to me is kind of how this defense really, really kicks into high gear.
They were more of like a Rolodex coverage team than I expected when I went back and looked at the actual numbers. Like, they play a decent amount of man on third down. I want to say it was like 38-ish, 40% of snaps, which is like a top 7-ish rate. But I think we ascribe just man-heavy team to them because of Patrick Surtain. But in reality, especially on early downs, that's not really who they are. It's a little bit more amorphous than that. And so how that looks with at least different defensive back personnel, worth paying attention to. Let's talk about what success looks like for the 2025 Denver Broncos. Dave, what do you got?
I'm going to try to be more like Derek here, because as we're talking through this, it's hard to come up with reasons why the Broncos shouldn't at least make the playoffs. Like, we did the whole thing with
This was
JJ
not the
McCarthy.
Chargers offseason. This is not slow played by the Broncos.
Totally. No, you're absolutely right. And like, when you feel that rock solid about one side of the ball, and we know, Bo Nix has already led a team to the playoffs. So if you can do it as a rookie, it's not an unrealistic expectation that you can do it in year 2. So I would say just prove that it wasn't a fluke. I don't really need anything beyond that. Just get back to the playoffs, prove that it wasn't a fluke, prove that you are part of this AFC landscape, and ideally, 2026, maybe we'll be talking about a Super Bowl push or a conference championship push, but as long as they prove this year or that last year wasn't a fluke and they get back to the playoffs, I think that's good.
I'm asking, as I often do, a little bit more from them than that. This was a team that, I think given the way that we've talked about them this offseason, we kind of forget that this was a team that barely squeaked in to the playoffs. Like, they lost their week 16 and 17 games and then had to beat the not actually Kansas City Chiefs to really get into the playoffs. And we're talking about them like this is a team that should automatically get in. So to me, the success for them is more convincingly be in the playoffs.
It's so true. Like, the way that you knew that Chiefs game was going to be a blowout within 5 minutes took so much drama out of that.
Yeah.
To where you sort of don't think of them as a team that squeaked in because that game was over immediately. But it could have been dicey. There's a world where it could have been much dicier than it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because my answer to this has nothing to do with final results, but I think if this is the equation, the final results will be what Derek is talking about. Everything else stays the same. You're a top 5 defense. You have one of the best pass protecting offensive lines in the league. We feel the exact same way about Sean Payton that we do coming out of last year, where he's kind of reminded us that he's one of those guys. And the quarterback takes a significant step forward. If all of that happens, this is an 11-win playoff team. And so I don't even feel like I have to put the 11 wins on it. Like, those are the ingredients that I need from the 2025 Denver Broncos.
All right, let me ask you this. What if Bo's just the same guy? Like, what if he doesn't take a step forward, but the Broncos are still like a 10-win team?
I think that would be disappointing.
Okay.
It would make the season
I'm just
weird.
curious.
They would probably be the weirdest team we would have to talk about going out of the season.
I think the quarterback is 25, and you have built this team to win now based on the amount of resources that you have spent. You are in that window, and I think you have real aspirations. Sean Payton has openly talked about the fact that he's had teams he thought could win the Super Bowl, and he's putting this team into that conversation. So if the head coach is doing that, I don't think we're wrong in giving them a pretty big bar to clear here.
Sean Payton is also, like, he is a Bill Parcells disciple. Like, he's not afraid of saying some wild. So that doesn't move me that much because Sean Payton is just such a big personality. Like, I don't view this team as a team that's in a Super Bowl window yet. Like, the skill players are not good enough for me to think this is a Super Bowl contender. Maybe I'm wrong.
So that's maybe one other detail I'll throw into what is a successful season. The skill position players also, I think, in lockstep with the quarterback, need to get to a place where this is a definitive top half of the league offense and maybe even a little bit better than that. It is very hard to have the 15th best offense in the league and not have like a real ceiling, right? Like, so the Eagles had like the 15th best offense in the league over the course of the whole year last year, but the Eagles in any single moment, because of the talent that they have like a nuclear option on offense. If you are not built like that and you are just week in and week out the 16th best offense in the NFL without that sort of ceiling, it's hard to win the Super Bowl. Like, you need a all-time like season-defining defense in order to be a championship caliber team built that way. I think the Broncos defense is going to be good. It's really, really hard to be that sort of defense. And so if the quarterback and the skill position players don't take the sort of step that take you out of that range offensively, I think if you're a Broncos fan and you realize what that means for your championship chances, that's going to be a little bit disappointing. Thanks for watching The Athletic Football Show. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with us. Like and comment on this video, and we'll see you next time.